The Spin-off Podcast Network.
Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No, don't. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/save. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
Feel your max with Brooks Running and the all-new Ghost Max 2. They're the shoes you deserve, designed to streamline your stride and help protect your body. Treat yourself to feel-good landings on an ultra-high stack of super comfy nitrogen-infused cushion that takes the edge off every step, every day. The Brooks Ghost Max 2. You know, technically, they're a form of self-care. Brooks, let's run there. Head to brooksrunning.com to learn more.
When the Facts Change is brought to you by the Spin-off Podcast Network in partnership with KiwiBank, the bank for Kiwi looking to get ahead in business and in life. A bank that delivers expertise and banking know-how, smart advice for business owners wanting to invest, grow their business or diversify. A bank that adapts with technology through the lens of its people and customers. It is a bank with heart that is driven by its purpose. Kiwi making Kiwi better off. Just imagine you're driving through Porirua, those group of suburbs just north of Wellington City, where there are enormous numbers of people in need of even more enormous numbers of homes. And have a look around and think about how much development there's going on and how much development's being done. Essentially, Porirua is stalled while the rest of the country is moving ahead. To give you an idea, in the 4 months to September, in each of the months, June, there was 1 house consented in Porirua. July, 3. August, 5. September, 4. This is for a city of over 65,000 people. To give you an idea, another city with about the same number of people, Napier, had 45 in June, 35 in July, 42 in August, and 21 in September. 10 to 20 times the number of houses being built. In this week's When the Facts Change, we go to the end result of that lack of housing supply, housing unaffordability, and the flow-on effects through into food poverty and the enormous pressure that is on the welfare system. We speak to Pat Hanley, who is a welfare rights activist, the founder of Poverty Free Aotearoa, and a trainer of advocates in Porirua, and in particular operating out of the drop-in centres in Tawa, Waikanai and Porirua itself. He talks about the intense pressure on people who are struggling to get food grants from WINS, bonds for rents. And rents, by the way, in Porirua are the most expensive in the country. To give you an idea about how expensive renting in Porirua is, the average rent in the September quarter was around $633 for a house per week in Porirua. That is well above the average in New Zealand of $560. 10 years ago, the average rent in Porirua was $340 a week, exactly in line with New Zealand. So we're talking about a near doubling in rents inside 10 years, whereas rents elsewhere haven't moved nearly as quickly. That is resulting in intense pressure on household budgets right across the region. We talked this week about the effects of that on our healthcare system, on the well-being of people in that area, and in the brutal political economy around a refusal to help people who are in need by those who think that a basic income necessary to have a place to live and food to eat is not a right, it's a privilege. Didn't always used to be like that. This week on When the Facts Change, we hear from Pat Hanley. And we hear about about a small piece of legislation passed in 1938. I'm Bernard Hickey. That's this week on When the Facts Change. Well, kia ora, and welcome to When the Facts Change to Pat Hanley, who is a benefits rights advocate based in Porirua and is the founder of Poverty-Free Aotearoa. Pat, lovely to have you on the show.
Nice to see you there, Bernard. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, and it'll be great to see you in person, where we'll both be at a conference, Poverty by Design, in Wellington on November the 22nd, being organised by the Friends of the Stout Research Centre at Victoria University, talking about the nature and source and potential solutions to poverty in Aotearoa. But first, could you tell us a bit about what you're doing day to day in Porirua?
Sure. So I began working with Auckland Acts Against Poverty about 10 years ago up in Auckland and doing benefit rights advocacy there. And then I really found it incredibly difficult after about a couple of years. And so I switched my tactics towards training of benefit rights advocates around the country. And in order to do that, we set up Poverty-Free Aotearoa. And we then ran training programs in Kaitaia, in Whangarei, Auckland, Hamilton, and more recently here in Porirua. In 2020, we began in Porirua. So I run a training program generally twice a year here in Porirua for people in the community. So we have people from community citizen advice bureaus, community law, other community organizations who come along and take a 2-day training program. And then we provide direct benefit advocacy at 3 locations in and around Porirua. One is at Oasis Cafe and Community Hub in the Waitangarua Mall in Porirua. And then we have a couple of folks at the Tawa Community Center. And we have a little space up in Waikanai called Cameo, and also a drop-in center. So we have 3 drop-in centers. We have benefit rights advocates available. They will assist you to navigate a very complex social welfare system and will, if you so desire, help you by going into wins with you and set out your situation and get you the outcome to which you are entitled. And we are very successful.
Yeah, so why do people need rights advocates? Because on the face of it, we have a welfare system which is there to help people. There are rights to income and food and accommodation. So why the need for advocates?
Well, there's 2 things. One, the legislation is extremely, has been chopped and changed and this and that and so forth. So it's very complicated, and hence it's helpful to have someone help you to navigate. Secondly, the working income culture is not supportive of providing assistance to people when they need it. And so you need to be able to challenge the system. For many people, they cannot challenge the system. If they're said, no, you can't have a food grant, they walk away without food. We don't accept that situation. Everybody is entitled to food, as you mentioned. It's a right. It's set out in the Human Rights Declaration of Human Rights, Article 25, that you are entitled to food. And the courts here have also upheld the fact that no matter what your situation, you are entitled to food. We don't allow people to starve to death. So, but people don't know that. They don't know. So they say, oh, well, you've had your entitlement, right? So they don't have a woman I was assisting just yesterday. She has an income. She has 3 children, 2 of whom have disabilities. She has an income of $1,100. You think, wow, that's pretty good on a benefit. Ooh, oh, wow, that's fantastic. But her mortgage, her rates, and the insurance comes to $960.
That's per week?
Per week, yeah. So she has about $200 left for everything else, right? So she was declined a food grant. So, it's hard to understand, but that is what happens. Another man, a young man, lovely young man, who has mental health issues. He needed assistance with dental care. He's got terrible. He's got an obsessed tooth. He needs emergency dental care. He was declined. And they said, the treatment was not economical. Can you believe it? Why would case managers act like that? because it's a culture of work and income to deny people as much as possible they call it protecting the taxes, the tax base. We've got to protect the tax base of New Zealanders. People work hard and pay their taxes, and we have to protect it. And so if we're not going to give you anything at all unless you can really prove that you need it. So we're back to a kind of a charity system rather than a rights-based approach. Could you tell us, because it's sort of surprising for someone who may not be watching this very closely, we're a rich country. We have GDP every year at the moment of $450 billion. We produce enough food for 40 million people, yet there are a couple of 100,000 kids who don't have enough food regularly. There are at least 500,000 people who need to use food banks and the likes. Why, in a rich country, do we have so many people who are in food poverty? Well, yeah, I mean, it is a complicated picture. There's no single thing. But number one is income distribution. So we have moved back from equitable income distribution. So if you're on wages and salaries, average wages and salaries around about $70,000, which that's not high wages, but that's about the average or median, as we say. Whereas if you're on a benefit, the median is around about 25,000, right? So goods and services are really pitched at those people with incomes around 70,000, whereas there are up to 600,000 people trying to survive on about $23,000 to $25,000. You can't do it. And I would like to think that we make some contribution by way of advocacy program, but you can't advocate sufficiently to get people out of that very stressful situation of constant ongoing hardship. And it's very hard, get a job. Well, young man I was talking to on the Monday, he has severe mental health issues. He doesn't appear, he's not drooling or, he's not gaga. He's very high functioning. But he suffers from a very chronic illness, which results in sometimes he's, vomiting in literally in a public situation. He can't cope, and he literally vomits, projectile vomit. And yet he was denied assistance with dental care on Monday, and they keep telling him that he should be going to work, and he would love to go to work, but he can't. And there's lots and lots of people who can't. And we just have to look after them. And that's our obligation. This is what a civilized community does. But the case managers, they don't know about the legislation. They're not very well trained. And they are put under kind of pressure to deny, to keep the expenditure of wins low. And it is backed up by attitudes in the community that said, oh, those people just get out there and get a job, blah, blah, blah. They have no idea the struggles that people go through. People resent sole parents getting a decent income. And they're doing the most important job in the world, which is caring for our children. But we resent it. We think that they've taken the money out of their pocket. I can tell you, sometimes you have to go to, if you work on income and you have a health or disability issue, you have to go to a doctor to get a certificate, right? Even the doctors resent giving you permission to stay home and look after yourself, right? Some of the doctors, they don't want to sign off the certificate. It's disgusting, but that's what we've come to, and it's promoted by certain people up there in the community, certain media people, certain politicians. They are creating this attitude that you ought to be grateful. You ought to be grateful. Well, I'm sorry, but I'm not grateful. I'm on super. I'm a superannuitant. I'm not grateful. So, Pat, we know there's an issue there, and it's been growing for decades. It is now entrenched in not just our communities, but as you talk about, the institutions of the state. So what are the sort of things we can do at a grassroots level and also at a higher level, a more socio-political level, political economy level, to actually make a difference here rather than just be the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff? When I run the training programs, I say to these people, many of you won't end up being active advocates out there, boom, 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 doing what we do. But one of the things I would hope that they would learn, and people listening to this might think about this, is that is when people say things to you that are derogatory of a person, a sole parent, that are derogatory of people who are relying on job seeker and so forth, that are reliant on when people make derogatory comments about them, which are ill-informed and wrong, stand up and say something. Just respond and say, I don't believe you. Because, people say stuff to me, which I completely disagree with. But I just walk away. I can't be bothered, arguing with these idiots. We got to stop these idiots from continuing, it's like this hate. It's like, and social media and stuff are also bad. You need to challenge incorrect perceptions of people who are on low incomes and are struggling. That's step number one. Speak out. It's like you speak out with racism, right? Or you speak out in terms of harassment of people, say, with disabilities or something like this. Speak out on behalf of people who are doing it hard, who are experiencing hardship, and who need the assistance to which they're entitled as a right, in my view. And so that's one thing you can do is to speak out, speak up, and support efforts to improve and increase. The benefit levels are way too low, and yet the polls show that New Zealanders are much fairer than what the system reflects at the moment. So we need to continue. You can write a letter to your MP. You can continue to say, what about increasing benefit levels, right? And now the level of benefits now, not just benefits. Now we're seeing superannuation, more and more people on superannuation. So there's a whole sector of the community who were not so bad. Now they're beginning to feel the pinch. So maybe they'll come into the fray and begin to advocate as well with the rest of us to say, this isn't good enough. This isn't good enough, right? And it is quite, the retirement commissioner is very concerned about the situation of superannuitants. If they don't own their own home and you reach 65, you're in trouble. You're going to be in trouble. So those are the kinds of attitudes and values that we can communicate to our neighbors and to each other, and think about that and say, the other thing that is to acknowledge that the folks who are not in the paid workforce are also most overwhelmingly doing valued work. They're also doing valued work, unpaid work in the community. I do unpaid work in the community. I love it. And lots of people out there are doing CABs, community, you name it, all kinds of voluntary stuff. So to value that more is also something. To participate more in your community is a way of dealing with the hardship that other people are experiencing, not just at food banks and welfare organizations, but just making it possible for people to be involved with sports. Sports groups, very healthy. It's quite interesting. I've noticed so often, particularly here in Porirua, that families who are really doing it hard, having difficulty, almost the very first thing they do is make sure their children have the equipment they need to go off and do their sports on the weekend. You see that in Porirua. Maybe it's everywhere in the country. I hope so. But I find it so amazing that people will they'll cut and but they'll make sure their kids get to their sports on the weekend. And it's fantastic.
So, Pat, you've been in this area for a couple of decades now. You've obviously thought a lot about the causes, and you can see on the ground daily what's going on. You talked there about, simply increasing incomes for people who are on the benefit. But, and I'm not looking for a silver bullet, I suppose no one is, but if you had to intervene, if you were able, godlike, to reach down and do something physically in the world, in that part of Aotearoa, what would you do?
I'd amend the Social Welfare Act for starters, and there are two things. There are two things that I would like to see, and I've spoken to politicians about this. There are two things I would like to see happen to better reflect Aotearoa. I always say I came to New Zealand, but I'll die in Aotearoa. There's a huge movement, the hikoi that's happening. This is a huge movement. And behind that movement is a whole different set of values, which are not European values. Well, we share them, but they are particularly prominent, more prominent among tangata whenua. But, the treaty is not referenced at all in the Social Welfare Act. So I would like to see the Social Welfare Act amended to reference to treaty. Now, this is not just politically correct nonsense. This is practical assistance. So in the Social Welfare Act, it may refer to family or whānau, but the term whānau is different from the term family. When you go to get a food grant, they will say, oh, no, because you've got all these people living in your house, they're whānau, right? But they'll only give you a food grant for your family, right? So you need 450 food grant because you've got, there's a funeral, a tangi happening, and you've got all these whananga coming around. They don't, no, sorry, no, you just get the food grant for you. They can look after themselves. Well, of course, that's completely contrary to tangata whenua values, right? And it goes on and on and on. In terms of all kinds of ways in which the values set out in the Social Welfare Act does not reflect what I regard as the modern values that we now share, particularly influenced by tangata whenua. And it's very important also for Pacific Bay. The second thing is that if you look at Article 4 of the Social Security Act, it sets out the purpose of the Act. And it says in the Act, this is specifically what it says, to alleviate hardship. Alleviate, not eliminate. So this is what I'm on the politicians about. Change that word. Change it from alleviate to eliminate. Because when you go in for that food grant and you say, I need $250, they will still immediately start negotiating downwards to simply alleviate. So that next Tuesday, when you get your benefit, you're right back to the same spot. You're going to need another food grant because they haven't dealt with it appropriately. When you go in to get an advance for bond and rent advance and so forth to get a combination, oh, no, you can't afford that. That's $695. That's a fairly typical rent here in Porirua. No, you can't afford that. You have to look for something cheaper. There isn't anything. So this is how the actual alleviation of poverty as opposed to elimination. So the rates of benefits, if they were set based on elimination, they would automatically have to be substantially higher. You would then look at the poverty line and above the poverty line, like minimum wage. That's the sort of level of benefit you would need to have. But it's also behind that is that going back to the kind of 1938 legislation where the health and well-being of the community, because poverty has the effect of creating downward pressure on wages, right? That it has downward pressures on compliance with health and safety regulations and so forth. It is very, in fact, because we are afraid of poverty, we don't complain in the workplace. We don't raise health and disability issues in the workplace. Think about Pike River. After that disaster, there were people there who said, those men went into that mine every day knowing it was unsafe, but they were afraid of losing their jobs. They were afraid the mines would be closed down. This is the function of poverty in our economic system, is to suppress wages and suppress costs to the employer. So poverty has a function. It has a function.
Just with my devil's advocate hat on, a pure economic reading of, let's say, increasing everyone's benefits to above the poverty line, so essentially increasing dollars received every week to a higher level, is that would simply turn into inflation in rents and food prices as the same amounts of goods and services were being chased by more dollars. Is that something that you think would happen, or is there an elasticity, a flexibility of supply that would respond as extra money came in?
So the current level of benefits, because of that, we don't have any food price inflation. We don't have now any inflation in the housing market, right? We already have that. We have enormous upward pressures on the cost of goods and services in this country, while still having a terrible welfare system. But we're only talking about a small proportion of the population in real terms. But the other thing is that if you increase those goods and the benefits in Porirua, it would mean like $50,000 of money going into the Porirua economy every week. We put it in Kaitaia, in the East Coast. the amount of transfer going, because people who on benefits, they're not going to be spending that money in Hawaii. They're not going to the Gold Coast. They're going to spend it on clothing for their children. They're going to spend it on fruit and veggies. They're going to spend it in their local economy. You're going to boost the local economy by transferring wealth to the least advantaged. And it may just require some tax adjustment.
Just on the other side of the equation, it occurs to me when the people at WINS are rejecting the applications for food grants or refusing the requests for bond payments, that it isn't like someone can walk out of the WINS office and find something to eat or a place to live. It's just not there if they don't have the money. So I'm curious, what are the effects on the rest of the publicly funded healthcare system, education system, hospital system of those refusals? Because, the world doesn't stop as soon as that refusal happens. People walk out, they get sick, they have to sleep in a car. I'm just curious, there must be other costs to the taxpayer. If it's all about saving the taxpayer money, you may be doing it one day, but then the costs in later days might be more expensive. So what are you seeing in that moment after?
Yeah, that is exactly what happens, is that you just have to look at the stats again, and you'll see that the incidence of respiratory diseases, chronic illnesses and so forth, infections and so forth, just spread. Like, when we talk about food grants, generally speaking, also include other household items like cleaning supplies. And so denying people the ability even to maintain proper hygiene in their household it follows on from that. And then children have to stay home from school because they got illness. We have children who stay home from school because they're too embarrassed because they don't have the right clothing. And so they stay home. They're 13. They stay home from school. And their parents, and then there's a big fight with the parents, and it's all very bad. The other thing is something called toxic stress syndrome. And a great scientist, Bruce Perry, actually alerted me to this stuff and way back. And so what it is that fight or flight syndrome, it kaboom, stress, fight or flight syndrome. That's what happens. Boom, boom, right? Quick. And so you get this injection, right? And you feel great, adrenaline flow, boom, great. However, if it continues on and on and on, it changes the way your brain functions. And in particular, it shuts down those parts of your brain which are responsible for collaboration, empathy, those sorts of things. And you're narrowed down to a kind of person who either fights or runs away. So these are the children you see who are the bullies in the class, in the school yard and stuff. They're in a family. Often they're in families under constant stress, or the child who just withdraws, and won't engage. These are often children in households that are under constant stress, and the children know it. And often the children blame themselves. 3-year-olds who blame themselves for their mommy and daddy not getting on. They take on, and that's toxic stress syndrome. There's a whole other thing that you could go on about toxic stress syndrome, but it actually changes the way your brain functions. And in particular, the more sophisticated aspects of your brain system shuts down. And so you go into a WINS office sometimes, you stick around long enough, you'll see people quite aggressive, give me that, you showed me, no, I can't, no, I want it now, blah, blah. Well, part of that is the stress that they're experiencing. That's how they respond, fight or flight. So yes, it ripples right through. It makes for a more unhealthy community at almost every level, including in the small children in the classrooms, in kindies and so forth, who are misbehaving, largely because they probably don't have enough food, they're angry, they feel stressed, and so forth. So it does permeate. It does permeate, and we pay at all kinds of ways for our failure to have an appropriate system.
And there was a time with the 1938 Welfare Act when the actual act made some comments about the community. Could you tell us about that?
Yes, well, Michael Joseph Savage, and from the cradle to the grave, and people were proud that they have brought in, because of the Great Depression had just occurred, and men walking the countryside looking for work and so forth. It was just so awful for people's experience. And these are people who had come to this country to get away from the European poverty and homelessness and all that sort of stuff that was typical in Europe at the time. And anyway, so the 1938 legislation, in its very purpose, it said that the provision of superannuation and the range of benefits to assist people is there to promote the health and well-being of our community. That's what they believe. They believe that a good social welfare system, effective welfare system, would improve the health and well-being of us all. And if you look at the strongest period, certainly I grew up in Canada, but also I think you look at the numbers here in New Zealand, you'll see in the 1960s, very progressive, very comprehensive. The welfare system was maybe not so good for some, but overall, and you will see that was also a period of great economic growth and prosperity. At that golden period, I think we're going through a golden period, we may never see it again. But anyway, the combination of an effective economic growth, economic production, innovation, and welfare, good healthcare systems, and so forth, came together, and we had a period of a golden period to some extent, And so these things can all work together to improve the well-being of all, so long as we don't isolate this issue from that issue, that the health and safety issues are also important alongside of enabling people to recover. There are three main life events that happen. One, health and disability deteriorates. You need help. Family breakup, you need help. Lose your job, you need help. Those are the three main events. If two of them occur at the same time, you're in deep shtuk. That's where we need to work on all three. That if people are not able to work at the present time, that you have the system is there from the cradle to the grave to enable people to get on with their life with dignity, respect, and so forth, including when they walk into one's office.
Pat Hanley, who is a benefit rights advocate based in Porirua and the founder of Poverty Free Aotearoa. Thank you very much, Pat, for coming on to When the Facts Change.
Thank you, Bernard. Appreciate it.
When the Facts Change was brought to you by the Spin-Off Podcast Network, together with KiwiBank. Visit kiwibank.co.nz to find out how KiwiBank are making Kiwi better off.
Does your brand have something important to say through meaningful messaging that reaches the right audience? At The Spin-Off, we work closely with our partners to create bespoke campaigns that bring value to both your brand and our audience. If you're interested in learning more about partnering with us, email Beck, that's BEC, at thespinoff.co.nz.
Right now on The Spin-Off, a new cover story. Inside the urgent race to solve homelessness in Aotearoa. Some stories can't be told in 280 characters. Support The Spin-Off's long-form journalism and donate today at thespinoff.co.nz/members.
The Spin-Off Podcast Network.